So how is BILAG actually scored? In a BILAG score, when you have the sheet on which you recorded all the information, each organ can be recorded and scored separately. So let's take the skin as an example. You have the scores for all the symptoms occurring in the skin. Using a glossary or a computer-based system, you can then calculate whether the skin is active or not. It is scored from A to E. A means it's highly active. That is to say, you would be using high-dose steroids or immunosuppressants. B means it's active but not highly active. You would use lower doses of steroids. C means that there's a low-level activity which isn't making you change the treatment. D means that organ was once active but it's not active anymore. And E means that organ was never active. So at the end of the BILAG assessment, for all the 8 organs or systems, you have a score from A to E. So a BILAG score isn't a number. A BILAG score is a series of letters. You might say this patient today has BILAG A in the skin, E in the kidney, C in the musculoskeletal system, D in the hematological system, or so on. Just like SLEuro, BILAG has advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is you can tell exactly which system is active and how it has changed from previous occasions, so it's richer in terms of data. A disadvantage is that it may be more difficult to extract the information and analyze it, and because it doesn't come out in terms of a number, it's harder to do statistics. It is actually possible to derive what's called a global BILAG score by converting the letters into numbers and adding them all together, and you can do statistics that way. You can also interpret BILAG in terms of the number of organs which have an A score or a B score at a particular time. So you can compare BILAG in a statistical way, but it is a little more difficult than with SLEuro. The proponents of BILAG stress the advantage of having more data on each organ. Part 6. What is a composite score? Historically, some clinical trials preferred to use SLEuro and some clinical trials preferred to use BILAG. Neither of them was perfect. For this reason, it has now become usual to use composite scores. In a composite score, the physician records both BILAG and SLEuro and usually a physician global score and puts all those 3 together to make a composite score. In this way, you can get the advantage of both the global index and the organ-based index to give a complete picture of what's happening to the patient. Probably the first composite score that was used was the SLA Responder Index, or SRI, which was used in the early belimumab studies, the BLISS trials. In the SRI, the outcome measure was whether a patient responded in terms of having at least a 4-point improvement in SLEuro, no significant worsening in BILAG, and no significant worsening in the physician global index. In other words, we know something about all 3 of those outcome measures, but the dominant one is SLEuro. Further variations of the SRI have been produced, for example SRI 6, which is exactly the same but requires a 6-point improvement in SLEuro. The SRI was very successful because it was able to show a difference between the treatment and control groups in the BLISS studies. Thus, composite indexes like this have become the standard for clinical trials. BICLA, B-I-C-L-A, is also a composite index, and this one is different because though it has BILAG, SLEuro, and a physician global score, in this case it's BILAG which is dominant. So to be a BICLA responder, you must improve in the BILAG, you must not get significantly worse in SLEuro, and you must not get significantly worse in the physician global score. Therefore, a BICLA is dominated by BILAG. BICLA was particularly used in the eprotuzumab studies and was found to be useful particularly in the phase 2 trials. Therefore, there are composite indexes available, which are both SLEuro-based and BILAG-based, and you will see these indexes used in clinical trials. So, in summary, we need activity indices in lupus because it's such a complicated disease. These indices enable us to record all the things which are happening to the patient and combine them in a usable and comparable way for the purpose of clinical trials. Global indices like SLEuro are useful from the point of view of ease of statistical analysis, but organ-based indices like BILAG give you richer data, perhaps with more effort being put in and more training. Perhaps the way forward is to use composite indices which combine BILAG and SLEuro and a physician global score.